Right, looks like the live stream is up.
Yep, it's about half loaded. I think it just timed out from me opening it before.
Okay,
We are live on YouTube.
cool. In that case, maybe just a few, I guess, Phil, why don't you go ahead and open up the meeting and maybe I'll just make a few announcements before the public comment period.
All right. So we have a call to order. I haven't seen the whole list, but it looks like we've got a quorum here today. I count 6. Yep. So far.
Seven, we got Trent and Lance online as well.
Okay, great. So, welcome everyone. Groundwater Advisory Committee meeting. They have a call to order, right, clock and introductions. We can start here in the room. So at this end of the table.
Chuck Fulbert, that's from State Sterling. Good morning, Zach Breed, hydrologist with the Nature Conservancy.
I'm Phil Brown, I'm a hydrogeologist from Beaver Creek.
Richard Smith, grouchy old farmer from Cooper Mountain Critical Groundwater area.
Ken Maston, irrigator from Klamath County.
And go around, I'm Justin Iverson, I manage the groundwater section and facilitate the Groundwater Advisory Committee.
Ben Scandella in the groundwater section and manage our groundwater database.
And I'm Annette Lieb, I'm the administrator for the technical services division.
And online.
I am Trent Kastner. I'm with Cascade Drilling and representing the monitoring well portion.
And Lance.
Good morning. I'm Lance Lindo. I'm the Environmental Health Administrator and Drinking Water Regulator for Klamath County.
All right.
And Laura?
Oh, sorry, Laura, yeah.
Hi, Laura Hart, Water Policy Analyst and the Rules Coordinator for the groundwater allocation rulemaking.
Okay. And then we've got folks online, I assume for the public comment or just listening in, and that's great. We'll get to that in just one moment. So first of all, just wanted to make sure that the committee members are aware that we did extend the public comment period out to the end of the commission meeting in June. So it'll go through 5 p.m. on June 14th, correct? Okay. Just to make sure everybody remembers, we are having our final public hearing for the rules tonight here in Salem. It'll be a hybrid meeting, so folks will be able to join online and give their comments there. We've got a informational session that we've been giving ahead of these public meetings, so that's essentially the slideshow that I've presented to you folks at least once, but various iterations over the last couple of years to just make sure that we give kind of a baseline information about what the rules contain for their major parts or the proposed rule changes are, as well as some background on why we're going about doing that. So folks have an opportunity to see that from 5:30 to 6:30. We answer questions. The presentation's about a half hour. We answer questions for the final half hour, take a break, and then we go into the public hearing portion from 7 to 9. So that's what's happening today and into the future. Laura and others will be compiling and summarizing all the comments we've received over the last 3.5 months in between June and July. And then our plan is to present a final draft set of rules to the commission for their review, and we're going to ask them to adopt them in September. So that's the timeline of where we're at. Today, hoping to, as we talked about during our last meeting in March, get up on the screen our thoughts and ideas and what y'all want to communicate to the commission as a committee group. And so again, the way we've done this in the past is to put a blank sheet up on the screen and collaborate on, put some language up that folks can discuss and edit until we're at a point where somebody wants to make a motion to adopt it. So that's our plan for today. Because we're still in the public comment period and we had a request last time, talked with Phil before the meeting, we agreed to have the public comment first so that you could hear anything folks wanted to communicate to you ahead of the deliberation. So got public comment on the agenda for the first half hour-ish or until we're done. And then we'll move into that advice crafting bit. So, I guess one way to do the public comment would be to have folks use the raise hand button for those people that are online. We don't have anybody in the room from the public, so it'll all be online. And if I am a good enough navigator of Zoom, I will be able to bring up a list of folks that are, I guess it's here now. Participants, there we go. And we should be able to have hands up and pop up to the top of the list there. So, I don't know, Phil, if you want to call on folks or you wanna...
Go ahead, Justin.
Okay. All right, in that case, I'll just take folks as we've got them up on the participants list and we'll start with Mike Pittner from City of Bend.
Yeah, hey Justin, thanks for the time. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Groundwater Advisory Committee. My name is Mike Pittner. I'm the Utilities Director here for the City of Bend. I'm also wearing a different hat here today as co-chair of the Central Oregon Cities Water Subcommittee. COCO, as we were referred to, is a collection of 9 Central Oregon cities. Collectively, we serve water to about 150,000 municipal water users here in Central Oregon and have some of the state's fastest growing cities in a desert environment. I'm joined by Owen McMurtry from GSI Water Solutions. GSI Water Solutions supports COCO and they provide a lot of our technical expertise as we navigate some of these complex groundwater issues. So we wanted to jump on today just to provide a few municipal points of interest as you all put together your advice for the Water Resources Commission. I'll turn it over to Owen here to provide just kind of a quick broader context of just some of the things that we're dealing with here and connect it to your work here as the Groundwater Advisory Committee. I recognize this is my first meeting that I've joined here with you. So, but first I just want to say that we applaud the department's effort to pick this effort up. This is a really, really complicated rulemaking. I think the interim director referred to it as one of the most important rulemakings that OWRD's made in the past several decades. And so we paid attention. We've been a part of this process for the last couple of years. And we recognize that an overhaul of the draft rules, the current rules, existing rules is definitely needed. Unfortunately, these rules simply don't work for Deschutes Basin cities. And Owen's going to provide some context as to just why that doesn't work for Central Oregon cities. And then I'll close us out and we'll let you get on with your day here. Owen, did you want to add?
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Can everybody hear me all right?
Yep.
Got it. Yeah. So yeah, like Mike said, you know, we've been tracking this on behalf of COCO for the last couple of years. Very complicated rulemaking, and I think we all understand a lot of the need for it. But there's maybe some unique aspects of the Deschutes Basin that make it, you know, a little bit complicated and makes it not work for COCO. You know, our understanding is, you know, the department's trying to make groundwater allocation more sustainable and more protective of existing water users, including, you know, in-stream water use and surface water users. And so there's two, in our understanding, you know, there's two key aspects of that sustainability and protection. It's addressing interaction with surface water, which is all in Division 9. And then we're trying to address groundwater levels. And that's all described in the Division 8 portion of the rules. And in the upper Deschutes Basin, where COCO's cities are located, we have the Deschutes Basin Mitigation Program. And as part of that program, there's actually language in the rules that says Division 9 shall not apply. Maybe just by a quick show of hands, how many of us are familiar with the Deschutes Basin Mitigation Program? Okay, I see a few hands. So the basis of that program was, there's a scenic waterway in the lower Deschutes River, and there are some other scenic waterways within, the upper Deschutes system. And in the mid 1990s, a study of OWRD and the USGS established that all of this groundwater pumping that was happening in the central part of the Deschutes Basin, Bend, Redmond, Sisters, was impacting surface water flows downstream in the Deschutes River Scenic Waterway. So we established this program to offset the impact of groundwater pumping on surface water in that area. And so that's why those rules have that component that says Division 9 shall not apply. So when we talk about how these rules are going to impact the upper Deschutes Basin, we're really just talking about the groundwater level component. We're talking about Division 8. And so in the hydrogeologic context that we find ourselves in there is you have this massive recharge area in the Cascades. All the precipitation, this is new geology, highly permeable, massive recharge in the Cascades. That groundwater then filters down to the lower Deschutes River, and there's a massive discharge zone at the end, down by Lake Billy Chinook. But you've got about, typically 4,000 CFS of average annual recharge. And, that fluctuates depending on the precipitation in any given year, but that's, the long-term average is about 4,000 CFS. One of the big influences on that recharge is there's also a significant artificial component. We cut a lot of canals through through this surface basalt about 100 years ago. And you can actually see in the record of Crooked River flows where a lot of that groundwater discharges, that the flow of the Crooked River increased by about 400 CFS from the 1910s to the 1960s. So there's a significant artificial component. And over the last 20 years that we've started to pipe these canals, we've probably eliminated 200 CFS of recharge. We're poised, there's a lot of projects out there seeking funding. We're poised to eliminate another 200 CFS or so of recharge just from canal piping. Meanwhile, the sum total of all groundwater pumping on an annual average basis in the upper Deschutes Basin is about 70 CFS. So we are, as we speak, eliminating more artificial recharge than we are actually pumping groundwater in the upper Deschutes Basin. And so it's against that backdrop, that we're concerned a little bit about how these rules might be applied, where you had this criteria in Division 8 previously that was really focused on, capacity of the resource and over appropriation, which, we can't get to an over appropriated state in the Deschutes Basin. The recharge is just far too great as compared to the pumping. That was the original framework that we had. And it feels like what we've gotten out of these rules at the end of the day is there's also just now a bright line of 25 feet. And the way that this aquifer fluctuates over the long term, compared to that base groundwater level that we've known for many years, just putting that bright line of 25 feet of decline on this large system, this complex system, is going to lead to a lot of unforeseen consequences.
Let me jump in there, Owen. Thank you. That's the point we wanted to drive home here to the committee, is that we have massive fluctuations in recharge in the Deschutes Basin. As municipal water users, we're a fraction of a percent in terms of the quantity of water that we're pulling out at the same time. And so the rules, when you apply a statewide logic across the state, just don't add up, and they don't really work well for the Deschutes. So I wanted to just make sure that you all understood that there are really some serious concerns with Central Oregon cities. Our collective mayors were all in a room last Thursday and city managers discussing this at a Cocoa Water Summit here in Central Oregon. And it's definitely gotten the interest of all of our leaders here. There's no free pass. We totally understand that cities have to conserve it to deserve it. We're fully invested in conservation and have been for over a couple of decades. But at the end of the day, the impacts to us, the capital impacts to our systems, to our ratepayers, have largely gone unstudied through this process. Ultimately, I think that as you'll hear today, the off-ramp provisions that allow us as a basin to go and set up our own set of rules is appreciated. That's really the only path we have forward to move forward now as cities. But I got to tell you, that is a pretty arduous path. The department tells us that they don't have staffing or support available to assist us in that effort until 2027, which is a multi-year effort. And then that obviously coincides with the sunset of the mitigation program in 2029. So at the end of the day, Central Oregon cities are in a very, very tough situation. These rules prevent our ability to effectively plan for our 20-year buildable lands inventories and some of the other statewide mandates that cities are required to meet. We'll figure it out. We'll get through it at some point. But these rules conflict with a lot of the things that the state is telling us to do in terms of long-term planning and really managing our costs. So that's what we wanted to leave you with. Thank you for your time. I know we had a lot of conversation to have today. If you do have any questions about how these rules are impacting Central Oregon cities or water utilities, please feel free to reach out to myself or the folks at GSI. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it.
Thanks, folks. Next, we've got Lisa Brown, and just in case someone came in since then, we're in the public comment period at the beginning of the meeting here, and if you would like to make a public comment, please use the raise hand function here, and we'll get to you next. All right, go ahead, Lisa.
Thanks, Lisa Brown with Water Watch of Oregon. I was a member of the groundwater allocation RAC. And I'm here this morning to request that the GWAC write a letter of support for the groundwater allocation rules. The rules are based on modern science and a very robust review of water levels statewide, groundwater trends and water levels statewide. The rules also finally much better align with the 1955 Groundwater Act, which does require the department to determine and maintain reasonably stable groundwater levels, as well as allocate groundwater within the capacity of the resource and protect groundwater for human consumption. So the proposed rules do a much better job of meeting those really what were very forward-looking sustainability goals set forth by the legislature in 1955. While we believe that the rules could be stronger in certain places, the rules do make just like critically needed changes to how Oregon allocates groundwater. First of all, finally putting defining and trying to maintain reasonably stable groundwater levels, which of course would help avoid situations like the Harney Basin, the Klamath, the Umatilla, other places around the state where we've seen, big declines in groundwater due to overallocation. The draft rules also much better protect senior surface water rights, both in stream and out of stream, which really under the existing Division 9 rules have been, all of those senior surface water rights have been sort of systematically injured by the issuance of new groundwater permits in Oregon. I would also add that, we've heard a lot about, including this morning already, about, places in Oregon where people say the rules won't work for them. And, we've looked at that. We disagree. We think the data analysis was robust, that supports these rules. If you look at the Deschutes Basin, as an example, and you look at the city's water supplies, they have ample water. And, there are a lot of conservation programs that could be brought to bear. I mean, for example, the city of Redmond does not have tiered water pricing because their city council rejected it in 2016. That's a major conservation tool. And there are a lot of other tools in the toolbox that can really help cities kind of, because if you look at their water use, what you see is, of course, huge summer peaks, that's based on outdoor summer watering of really large lots, right? And so there's a lot of tools that you can use to try and get that peak down and help meet the city's needs over time, as well as other tools like transfers and the Conserved Water Act. And there is the provision in the draft rules that would allow basins to pursue basin-specific rules if the reasonably stable definition is really not working for them. I would just close by saying that, if you've been reading the New York Times series on groundwater overallocation across the country and really across the world, what you do see is that there is a lot of pushback to making the system better. A lot of interests, I think, have become accustomed to, getting the groundwater permits that they ask for, and change is hard, but I think it elevates the role of a committee like yours in supporting these science-based rules. And I'll just leave it right there. So I really thank you for your service on the GWAC, and look forward to the discussion. Thanks.
Okay. Thanks for people that have submitted public comments. I don't see anybody else online with their hand up, and we don't have anybody from the public in the room, so we could move on to the next agenda item.
Okay, the next agenda item is C, which is advice to the Water Resources Commission. So as Justin described earlier, typically we draft some language as a group discussion, get it up on the board when Justin's typing away furiously, and see if we can come to some consensus on what the committee's level of support or thoughts about the proposed rulemaking, and give advice to the commission. So that's what's in front of us now. I do have a question for Justin that popped up while listening to public comment. I recall from the RAC that there was an exclusion where, and I think this was in response to input from COCO, that there's an exclusion where a basin rule exists.
So the language says for both Division 8 components and Division 9, there is a provision in there that says basin program rules can supersede. Yeah. So there's no specific exclusion. I would say that because there are the two critical groundwater area components of the basin program rules for Butter Creek and Stage Gulch, that those might be existing exclusions because they already define much more tightly reasonably stable water levels. But other than that, I think it's a future looking acknowledgement.
And so those basin rules don't currently exist in the Deschutes Basin. Is that what I was getting, I think, from Mr. Buehner's comments, is that it would be a difficult task to develop them?
So the task would involve rulemaking.
Yeah.
Just
Okay.
in general. So it would be a general rulemaking process.
I was under the misconception that basin rules existed for the Deschutes Basin currently.
So basin rules do exist, and I think as Owen had mentioned, the mitigation program for groundwater impacts on state scenic waterways exist within those basin program rule provisions. So that's an example of where the Deschutes has superseded the Division 9 rules locally, and that will remain intact. So, however, there's not currently anything in the division rules that defines reasonably stable water levels for the
Actually,
Deschutes Basin.
Division 8 topics that, oh.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, I'm sorry, I needed some clarification
Yep.
on all that.
No problem.
Appreciate it.
Is it okay, can I ask one more clarifying question? Yeah, so
Oh, yeah.
Justin, one thing we heard was that recharge from the canals is influencing the 25-foot determination. Is that still the case, do you think, despite the changes to the reasonably stable groundwater levels now saying that it's 25 feet using the highest annual water levels unless there have been anthropogenically induced recharge?
I'll say yes, and so I guess the rules as they're proposed now say, you know, we're going to take the highest known water level as our reference, because again, we're looking at this cyclical climate impact on water level trends over like 10-year roughly timescales. And when we developed the 25-foot threshold, we looked back at observation wells that we had with periods of record 25 years or greater that we deemed were dominantly impacted by climate fluctuations. And there's a well west of Sisters near the Cascades. That's kind of one of the examples that I commonly throw up because it's got such a quick and relatively large magnitude response to the climate cycles from the Cascades, right? So, and the peak to trough is 25 feet, well, it's less than 25 feet, but it's about 25 feet. So, sorry, now where am I going with this? You had asked specifically about the man-made. So, as we were looking at the highest known water levels from this suite of few hundred obs wells that met this long record climate influenced criteria, we noticed a couple where water levels went up significantly higher than what it showed in the past. So we had a relatively long record, we had water levels, and then the water levels went up. So two of those wells at least are near reservoirs that were developed over that period of record. And so Emigrant Lake Reservoir south of Medford and Lake Billy Chinook that's north of Bend, both of those had observation wells nearby. And when those reservoirs were filled, the water levels rose, you know, dramatically and significantly. Another example is Cooper Bowl Mountain, where we have long water level records. And when aquifer storage and recovery started, water levels came up above what our historical records said. They came up to land surface. They may very well have been there before the 50s as well, but it was clear that that was higher than what we had in our past 50, 60, 70-year record. And canal leakage may very well do that. So Owen cited a increase in flows in the Crooked River. To the best of my knowledge, that happened. What that means for water levels in a highly transmissive aquifer still needs to be determined if that's something that we're going to determine. So those situations exist all over, and we're going to need to make some call on what that is. So,
but just putting a finer, go ahead. Matt.
Yeah.
And just to add to that, you know, if the commission adopts the rules and that language is in the rules, we will collaborate with stakeholders in the basin on what that methodology looks like.
Right, got it, thanks. So in any basin where there's anthropogenically induced recharge that is artificially increasing water levels, the goal is not to draw a line in the sand that 25 feet is 25 feet. The goal is to work with them in areas with anthropogenic induced recharge to try to understand what a correct reference would look like. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I mean, the 25 feet, I think that's our best understanding of what the response in groundwater levels is that encompasses 90% of the wells we have records for. And so we aren't proposing to change on our initiative, the 25 feet, but where we measure from will be changed. And I guess the balance or the nuance I'm trying to communicate is, in the Billy Chinook example, really obvious what that is. In the Emigrant Lake, really obvious. In Cooper Bullhound, really obvious. In the irrigation canal case, I shouldn't say most, I really don't know. Many irrigation canals were developed before we had ever started measuring water levels. So we weren't, or groundwater levels, excuse me. We weren't measuring groundwater levels in 1900 forward to know what exactly it was. So we're going to have to use best available information to calculate that and figure that out.
All right, thanks. That's helpful.
Yeah.
Well, we got something very, very similar to this going on that's happened in Klamath over the last several years. And that was when the water, we're talking an old lake bottom. And when the water was not put in the canals that summer, we had, over 200 wells drop, and some of them went dry. Some of the people just had dropped their pumps. But over 200 just because the water was not put in the canals. Yeah, it was incredible. Yeah, it was incredible. I mean, and like I said, we're talking on a lake bottom. And so I'm assuming with the water in the canals that the wells are probably about where they are usually always at. But when that water was not put in there, it was incredible how much a lot of them wells went down. And it was all because the water was not put in it now. So obviously that has a huge effect on that area down there. Like I said, now it's an old lake bottom, so I would kind of assume naturally with water in the canals, that's where the wells normally exist, or did exist even. It's, like you said, you don't have records back that far, so it's hard to tell. But yeah, they've had a lot of talk about this down there and how they would like to pipe some canals. I mean, Horsefly has piped quite a few canals, and they have seen reduction in the water they need to put down them canals by anywhere from 30 to 40%. That's how much seepage there is out of the canals. And, but KID, Klamath Irrigation District, is trying to be very, very careful because they did see this back when they didn't put the water in the canals. So they're being very careful on which canals they're gonna pipe or line or which ones they're not. Yeah.
Well, I wonder if there's, in order to move towards, advice to the commission from the committee, I wonder if there's a need to revisit the basis for the rule change. Does everybody understand? It's usually been a part of every one of your presentations. It's like, why are we here? Why are we doing this? And while, there's not, uniform, we've heard, two sides of, two different opinions about support for the rule changes just this morning. And I think we've been seeing that in most of the public comment, period. But I mean, to this point, I personally haven't heard anybody stand up and say, the system's working fine, it's as it is, it's protective of the resources and it's protective of senior water rights holders, and we shouldn't, fix it because it's not broken. I haven't heard that. Have you gotten feedback in some of your public comment periods that suggest that there's folks that think that no rule changes are necessary?
We haven't reviewed all the comments
Okay.
that have been submitted, so we won't get to that until after the end of the comment period.
So, I was wondering if anybody in the room has any thoughts on that particular topic, just as just like to get out the gate and move towards our business here today. It's like, does anybody would think that rule changes are unneeded to protect the resource and senior water rights holders?
Well, I got mixed emotions about it in some ways, because I think we've got to be very careful on what happens and during drought years. And we got to be very careful about taking those drought years as being normal, because they're not. And I think we got to be very, very careful about that. And so, yeah, I do worry about the drought years being used more for, there's something happened to the aquifer when it was just because of a drought. You get out of that drought and then it kind of rebounds. And so I think we gotta be very careful about that.
Yeah.
We got spots in the Klamath Basin that have had some serious issues, Merrill, Henley areas. Out there in the Lander Valley, I've seen no drops at all. And so there's, even just within the basins, it is incredible how different just within the basins it is. Yeah. And then you get, part of what's happening, what's affecting especially the Merrill area, is all the wells that have been drilled in TID, which is like in California.
Mhm.
And once again, that's one of them things that if we can keep water in the system, they don't use the groundwater wells, they use the water in the system. And of course, that's ESA things that have been going on there, and I don't know how you address them. Yeah.
So you think that some changes to the rules are needed, but you just gotta be careful that you're paying attention to how the natural systems vary.
Exactly.
And don't
Yep.
unnecessarily restrict.
Yeah, be careful about doing a bunch of restrictions because some natural things are going on,
Yeah.
Trying to think about how a drought would factor into a decision for a new water right.
Sure. Well, if I may, the reason we chose, so the rate test is based on a 5 to 20 year period. And the total magnitude test is based on wells with a 25-year or more record. And those values were selected taking into account long periods of time in which there were ideally a decadal wet and dry cycles. So the values that we chose in order to capture drought periods, at least on the decadal cycle, that backward looking we've seen in the past. So if the future acts like the past, then the ranges that we're proposing should be a fair predictor of when we've exceeded drought conditions causing declines. That's the idea, because again, we're going to make decisions as we do today on a case-by-case basis. So we're going to look at local water level trends. And the trick is, looking backwards is great. We have the 2020 hindsight, right? But we need to, or the goal was to come up with values that we thought would be predictive looking forward or anticipating forward to say, okay, if we see a falling limb on the hydrograph, if we're within these thresholds, then in the past, for 90% of the wells we looked at, they came back up in a wet cycle in the next decade. When it's crossed those thresholds, and check me if I'm wrong here, please, then for the wells that we have records of in the past, for 90% of those wells, they've continued to drop off. And so the thresholds are a way for us to put some quantitative sideboards on what we see today to say, okay, well, when it gets wet in the future, are we gonna expect it to turn around or to keep going? And that's why views that we have through the assessment of our past record. So anything to add to that?
Less on the science, but just on a design of the rules. By the way, I'm Ben Scandella. Oh, we already introduced ourselves. That the switch from water levels being reasonably stable to not reasonably stable, if that happens because of declining water levels, that's not a one-way street. If water levels decline, say due to a drought beyond 25 feet or the limits that would cause the levels to fail that rate test, and then they come back up again, water can be available. Water levels can become reasonably stable again in case the drought is in fact temporary.
And I'll say we did a lot of hemming and hawing about like, it's unideal to have, not reasonably stable, and we've done our best to suggest values that will minimize that. I don't think we'll eliminate that, unfortunately, but hopefully, our best understanding is that we've minimized it to the degree possible, so.
And I think it's important, so to keep in mind that what we're talking about is, there's nothing retroactive about this, right? This doesn't affect existing water. This is about how new water rights are considered moving forward. And so it seems like an oversimplification of the response to a drought would be if in a certain area, if a drought had a big impact on water levels and they toggled to not reasonably stable, that door would close for making new water rights available. But as Ben pointed out, it's possible that after the drought, the door would reopen because water rights are available.
Right, my point is that it's not a permanent restriction on new water rights.
Yeah.
It's if there's water available again, that there would also be water rights potentially available again.
Right, so not only would it take a pretty darn big drought to trigger the greater than 90th percentile of historical data used to make these thresholds, but also if that drought happens and it's temporary, then water levels will recover and will become reasonably stable. Water rights are then available to allocate again. And to me, that feels more or less right. I think if the drought is so significant that it goes beyond these thresholds that have been quantitatively determined using historical data and historical droughts, it should be okay to temporarily pause, let's be judicious about giving out new water rights. We don't want businesses to make decisions based on water they might not have available to them until that water recovers, until the aquifers recover and we see, yep, we're good, we're in good shape. These water rights can then be allocated. That feels like it hits a decent balance to me of being sustainable and also thinking through what this means economically. Livelihoods.
I agree. A lot of thought and planning has gone into that, trying to make it flexible.
Yeah.
In that regard, and try to pick some benchmarks that are reasonable, but there's still some flexibility on what's been described as the bright line.
Well, and to try to protect the existing water right users, why not over allocating by putting some new people in when it's in decline, which would jeopardize your water level and the amount of water that would be available for you.
Well, I do, sorry, go ahead. I did want to say that I liked your approach of figuring out where do we all agree as a committee?
Yeah.
And starting with, I think it'd be fair to say, I hope that we all agree that the intent behind this rulemaking, being protective of the resource, of having a sustainable groundwater system, and being protective of senior water right holders, both surface water and groundwater right holders. That seems like a good place to start, but I suspect we have good agreement on in this committee.
And domestic water use.
And domestic water users, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I support that statement. I mean, I think that, when the department makes clear what its mission is, what it's been directed to do by the commission, and, then the technical basis for the rule change, I mean, it's clear. Right? And I support the intent to, change the rules to be more protective of the resource. I think that's a fundamental, building block of what's been going on. And like I pointed out earlier, I haven't heard contradictory opinions about that. So I think that's a good starting point for agreement, and perhaps something we could capture in our feedback to the commission. You know, and personally, having mostly observed the RAC process, I think, you know, like most rules and legislation, you know, you can't achieve perfection, and you can't achieve necessarily a perfect fit for every situation. I think the department has done a good job in trying to build in some flexibility that allows specific sites, specific conditions, what's going on with the surface water in a specific area to be considered. But the need for a rule that's reasonably well understood across the state in all these variable situations, east side, west side, places where the aquifers are not in connection with surface water. And we know there are some places where they clearly, I think a lot of effort has gone into that. And I appreciate the technical basis, the science that's gone into that. And so, you know, personally, without attempting to minimize anybody's thoughts about the fact that there will be some impacts to this, and that it'll be difficult in certain places and be difficult for certain, I don't know, market sectors of Oregon's agricultural economy to figure out a new path forward through this, without trying to minimize the fact that there will be some new paths negotiated. It might be difficult for some groups. It still seems, you know, I'm in support of the rule change, and I think that it's going to be a good thing for managing the resource in the state. It'll be better than the existing system. So personally, that's where I stand on trying to provide some feedback to the department. And I don't mean for that to suggest that that's the message. But I mean, I think that we're going to need to incorporate, if there are different views on the committee, we need to find a way to capture all of those and make sure that the commission knows that, you know, there are various degrees of support.
Well, I think one thing you said, Phil, is another place where I suspect we'll have unanimous consensus on the committee. I could be wrong, and I very much welcome anybody to speak up, but like, you know, I think we can all agree that the department, and I think this is important to message to the commission, that the department has done an incredible job with public outreach over the years, with doing some like novel analyses and work to inform this rulemaking. Whether or not you agree with the proposed rules, we can acknowledge that the department has done new statewide analyses to inform the rules. We can acknowledge that they've done extensive public outreach over the years, and that they've pulled together a diverse rulemaking committee that included Lisa and Mike up there that we heard from earlier. I was also part of that rulemaking committee. It was by far the biggest and most involved rulemaking committee, and also the longest rulemaking committee I've ever been a part of. So I think I would just put that out there as another starting point. So like, if this committee that we're in right now can agree that the intent is good, that the department staff have put a lot into this to make this as right as possible, acknowledging it's not going to be perfect for everybody. I'll just stop there and see if there are is there any dissent about those two comments as starting points for a letter of advice to the commission?
I don't think so. I think the biggest thing I worry about is, because I've heard, and I will totally tell you right now, this is a lot of this is rumor, I heard. And so, but I hope the department does not get carried away in the fact that, and I'll be honest with you, where one of them is in the rumor is in the Sprague River Valley. That the department, because of the tribe's call on the water, at this point has only been able to shut off the surface water users. And that was Brooks, I think it was Brooks' lawsuit. Opened it back up so the well users, the groundwater users could still pump. Now, the static levels in them wells are not dropping. But the rumor is that as soon as they can get that classified critical groundwater area, they're gonna shut off all them groundwater wells. And so I worry about, and like I said, this certain amount of this is rumor I'm hearing, but I do worry about that kind of stuff.
Oh, I feel like I'm talking a lot, but I like that maybe that letter of advice to the commission should address very specifically that this committee acknowledges that these proposed rules are only for future water rights and do not affect existing water rights in the Klamath Basin and Sprague or anything else.
That's a very good thing. Yeah, very good thing to put in there.
And that might help clarify some of those rumors. It might also,
that would help a tremendous amount. Yes.
So does anybody on the committee disagree with that, with including that statement? And sorry, folks online, feel free to speak up. I apologize. Okay,
A disagreement here.
great. Well, let's maybe include that
Yeah,
as well.
definitely.
I think a lot of the conversation has been about the reasonably stable. It's what we heard from Coco. Phil, you mentioned this as an entry point. Should we dive into that a little bit more specifically, see what this committee can say about
Yeah.
reasonably stable?
Yeah, I'm happy to go wherever in the conversation. Don't need to look to me.
Well, I think, I put forth, one thing that I like about this committee and one thing that I've seen from watching, prior iterations of y'all do your work is the attention to science and the attention to what the best available science says about what the proposals are, what the current topic is. And so I would like to put something into the letter that acknowledges that the proposed definition of reasonably stable is consistent with, Gleason and others, 2020, and Cuthbert and others, 2023, which we don't need to cite those specific papers, but I'd like to acknowledge that the department's proposed definition is in line with the current state of the science with hydrogeology. Is that something that we could do? Is that a bridge too far?
No, I don't know if it's bridged too far. I think it's totally consistent with one of the points I was intending to make that, I don't personally, from my perspective, especially a geologist, I think that there's a very sound technical basis for the definition of reasonably stable on that. I mean, the department's put a lot of work into it, spent a lot of statistics. And I don't see that that's inconsistent to cite that definition is consistent with other published works in that same thing.
Great. Well, you said it better than I did. So, Justin, were you writing that down when Phil was talking?
Sorry, I was trying to recall exactly what was said before, but, rules in line with help me out how to.
Sound technical basis for the proposed definition of reasonably stable is, I think, what Phil said.
Yeah.
No, it's been quite obvious that there's been a lot of work gone into that. From my viewpoint, at least, that they are sound. There's been a lot of effort put into it.
Yeah, it's participating in the RAC. and listening to the amount of work that went into it and the rationale behind it. It's an impressive piece of work by the department.
Well, given the amount of data that they had to work with, because there's areas that we don't have monitoring wells, that's just.
So the points that I made, I think that we haven't heard any dissent. I think that the basis that we can all agree on, and I think he captured most of this is, the need for the rule change. I think we all agree is there. And, we need to acknowledge that it's forward-looking. It's not, focused on in any way the existing water rights. There's a sound technical basis for the proposals for the changes to Division 8 and Division 9. Definitions of reasonably stable water levels and, surface groundwater interactions across the state. And as Zach mentioned, the department has gone to great lengths for public involvement, both through the RAC and post proposed rule. All these public outreach meetings, there's been a lot of opportunity for public to respond to proposed rule change along the way. I think that's a good point to make.
Sorry, I'm redoing these as we go. Or as I'm hopefully hearing. So by all means, I'm trying to capture GWAC's words and feelings here. So if I've misparaphrased, by all means, stop me. So, or edit. I guess while we're paused here, I'll just take the opportunity to check in with Lance and Trent and see if you two online have anything to add at this point.
I think the point of talking about the future water rights is very important. I thought that was well done, and I really agree with that. So, but other than that, it's been very good conversations. I can see several different points of view.
So this is Lance here. I think looking at the things that we're putting down on paper, I think that covers a lot of my perspective here. I think more generally, kind of from a public health perspective, I'll just keep this pretty basic. The scarcity of water, especially in places like Klamath County, where we've experienced that drought over the last few years in one form or another, is critical to public health, maybe the most critical. So I think that the forward-looking rules that we implement toward new users are really an important necessity to making sure that we conserve water, in areas like the basin that continues to have most years depleting water levels. So I think these are a lot of great ideas. I agree with them, and I appreciate everybody's work in this. Thank you.
So is there anything else that we want to add for the commission to consider? Either as a concern or as a category of a supportive comment for the rule change? Does anybody have any thoughts that they'd like to see incorporated in this list of things we can agree on?
I'm trying to think of something that we could, and I don't know if there's anything we can do with it or not, but an I keep thinking about the impact that TID is having on, a lot of that area around Maryland and Henley areas. And I don't, I mean, now you're talking a complete different state, and so it's very, very difficult, very tough. And I realize, I'm on that TID advisory committee also, groundwater advisory committee, and it is extremely difficult. And it's, I know the state of California has gotten involved somewhat. And they're doing some things, but yeah, it is incredible how if the surface water's flowing, everything's kosher. But man, when the surface water quits flowing, oh man, things get dicey down there. But I don't know what you'd put in there about it. I really don't.
Some bullet that encourages the states to work on interstate groundwater issues as well.
Maybe something like that try to, yeah, especially on them close state line situations like that, something, try to get the states to try to work together, yeah. It would be very interesting. I know, like, the state of California, you see, they have a local group. Each area has a local group that is supposed to be taking care of the groundwater issues and watching that and stuff. And I almost question if Oregon shouldn't, especially on some of those areas, form something like that. So those groups could, start working together and start watching and listening and talking and this kind of stuff. Yeah.
It's also, I think, isn't, the group that is doing the water planning for the Tule Lake Basin, didn't I read that the state is gonna sue them for failing to implement their signal rules? I don't know, I just read it. I just read a headline. So, I mean, they have these local planning groups, and I don't think they've all been.
Anyway,
Oh, is that Tulare
the state
County,
has
not
taken some
Tule?
action on the, San Joaquin Valley.
Oh, okay.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
okay.
For Tule Lake, the state found their plan incomplete, so they have some time to update their plan.
That's right.
Send it back to the drawing board.
They sent it back.
I think I had heard something about that, yeah. Yeah.
Should read those headlines more carefully. Tulare.
Yeah.
It's easy to do, but I think that would be great if we could get, especially on those state lines like that, and where you got water users on both sides and different rules and all that stuff. If we could have local groups from both sides working with each other and trying to work some of these things out, I think that'd be a great thing to put in place. I really do.
I like encouraging better interstate cooperation, collaboration.
Yeah, well, I think it'd help the water resource department because they wouldn't be so taxed to try to get down there and do all this stuff. They could have that local group that could just be reporting to them, yeah. Yeah.
I also think that what you're talking about is a great example of the kind of surface water, groundwater interchange and the relationship between how surface water is managed and how groundwater is managed, which, feeds right on into Division 9 rules here, or the proposed Division 9 rules. So, but I don't know if we needed an example to hammer home the point that surface water affects groundwater through canals and lake filling, and groundwater pumping affects surface water. That's a good example to use.
It's incredible. It is incredible down there. It is incredible.
Chuck, how are you feeling about what's up there?
I'm in agreement.
Absolutely. Taking Dad?
Well, off the top of the head, no. Taking a bunch of notes, but all my notes are pretty much in line with what's up there.
I think that's about all we can do is suggest an encouragement to.
Yeah. Is it worth, I'm asking this as a question, this is not a leading question. I don't know it's totally gonna be useful for the commission, but is it worth talking about the specific thresholds? We're saying there's a sound technical basis for the definition of reasonably stable water levels. there's a sound technical basis for the surface water groundwater interactions that have led to Division 9 proposed rules. Is it useful for this committee to talk about, advising the commission that the proposed thresholds of 0.6 feet per year over 5 to 20 years and 25 feet total are something that this committee approves of? Or is that going too deep into the weeds for something that would be useful for the commission?
That's a great question for Justin. I'm not sure I know. I would know the answer.
I also don't know the answer. I think this is already gonna be kind of our longest statement. In the past, we've taken, GWAC advice and put it in our slideshow to the commission whenever we've had a proposed rule change. This is already gonna be, in the past, I think it's been one slide, but this will already be several slides. So I think up to you folks if you wanna, how much detail you wanna go into. Unless anything.
Well, yeah.
Maybe.
I think it's really up to you.
Okay. I don't wanna force more slides in a presentation, Justin.
Well, no, that's not the criteria, sorry, just trying to express that this will be more in-depth than we've done in the past, so.
Okay, that's good feedback.
And that's fine, I mean, it's a significant proposal and I think that's appropriate, so.
Well, I'm fine leaving it as is. I'm also fine continuing the conversation a little bit to see if it's worth saying the GWAC specifically likes the proposed thresholds. I don't know. It's up to you all. I'm new here, so I don't know what the GWAC usually talks about. So Justin, that was helpful context. Thank you.
Well, this is my second term, and I don't think that anything that's happened prior to this informs.
Yeah.
To answer the question, you said being new is not a disadvantage.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Being having new people and new ideas is really good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, and I don't mean to move on, but because I mean, I'm fine with it either way. I'm fine adding that level of detail because it's true that after being exposed to the basis for those thresholds, I was in support of that. So that's true. I'm wondering if the topic of basin rules and specifically the Deschutes Basin and acknowledging that there's an off-ramp for basin-specific rules is important. I think, we heard concern from Coco throughout the RAC meetings on that. I think it was a pretty standard theme that Coco was concerned and it didn't feel like the rule changes worked specifically for the Deschutes Basin. And I was confused because at one point I thought that the dimension of, they may be supplanted by basin-specific rules. I thought that the Deschutes Basin already had all of those rules in place. I wasn't aware that there would still be some rules development specific to that. But I think acknowledging that as we have, that it doesn't work everywhere, but there is a path towards developing rules that work better for a specific basin. That might be important, that we acknowledge that some care has been given to not make this completely black and white for every location.
Yeah, that works for
To
me.
allow flexibility for different situations.
So they're all different.
Sorry to change the topic there,
No,
Zach, but
not at all.
I'm at an age, in another 5 minutes, I would have forgotten all about that.
I can. Actually, sorry, I'll try and get all this on one screen. At the risk of making it too small.
One thing I like about what's in the proposed rule that acknowledges the off-ramp to redefine these thresholds and basin rules is that it proposes criteria that should be considered if that approach is taken. And I'm putting myself on the spot by having to maybe try to remember all those criteria, but I think they included if basin program rules redefine these thresholds, then they should consider impacts to domestic well users. They should consider impacts to groundwater dependent ecosystems. And I think there was a third thing that I'm not remembering off the top of my head.
Long-term sustainability of the resource.
Thank you for that. Yes, and they consider impacts to long-term sustainability of the resource. I think that's an important piece of that off-ramp, so it's not, so it provides the context through which these aquifer specific conversations should happen. So I would just propose acknowledging that within our statement to the commission.
And one friendly clarification, it says impacts to wells,
Thank you,
not domestic, it's not limited to domestics.
appreciate that.
Impacts to existing wells or something, got it.
Is that okay with everybody if we include that? It's in the rules themselves or the proposed rules themselves.
Yeah,
Thanks.
if it's important to acknowledge the off-ramp, then I think the framework of that off-ramp is equally important.
Great.
The time for me to pass out muffins?
Yeah, and we've got time to take
Real
a break
coffee.
if folks, if folks would like a break, just let me know.
You stayed up all night.
Yeah.
I did. But not making muffins.
Party.
Thank you, no, I don't need more.
Well, I feel good about what's up there on that screen. I think, is it, again, asking the question naively, is it worth just bluntly ending with a statement that says the GWAC or some proportion of the GWAC support the proposed rules? End of sentence.
Yeah, I mean, what we have here shapes up as a letter of support,
It does.
and it just doesn't say it.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Well, if there are no objections, I'd like to make that clear. And I was reviewing my notes and, I had made a bullet list of the high points thinking about my personal, reaction to the rule change and I don't think I have anything else that I'd like added to the list.
So I think Trent got his hand up though.
Great.
Yeah, yeah, I'd like to see that added to the list.
All right, great. Thanks, Trent.
Just as a personal comment, I'd like to say that you guys have done a great job of informing us over the last few meetings, giving us a basis to be able to talk about this. It's done a good job.
Thank you.
Looks like we're close.
It's motion that this is what we send to the commission.
I'll second that.
Okay. Any objections?
In a second.
All right, oh, what is the second? You just did your,
Yeah.
Second, gotcha.
We had like a second and a third. And a fourth, so.
I'm hard to do.
So I think we moved to make that the basis of our feedback to the commission.
Okay,
Yeah.
all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Yeah, good, okay. Lance and Trent?
That's an eye for me. That's an eye for me. This is Lance.
And Trent, are you in agreement with the statements here? You need a moment to read through? I stepped away. But regardless, I'll get his yay or nay or staying on the record, I guess.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, all right. I will, or Laura will, take these bullets as they are and make sure they're in the record. We'll make sure to call them out in our presentation to the commission in September. And yeah, I really appreciate everybody's time and discussion and conversation. So for the last more than 2 years now. So I think I first presented this to folks in March of 2022. So yeah, it's been a good long process.
So the commission meeting is now in September?
Yeah, so
After the extended public comment.
that's correct. Yeah, so the commission always had meetings in June and September planned, and just as a reminder, we've got meetings planned for the Tuesday before the June meeting, as well as the Tuesday before the September meeting. And we, again, extended the public comment because we heard that folks wanted to talk to the commission about the rules, and so we want to make sure that was within the public comment period, so we could take that all into account and get it summarized. So we extended that public comment through the end of the commission meeting. And we are still planning to keep the rest of the original timeline, which is compile all the comments in the second half of June and July, get that all wrapped into a staff report for the commission in August so that they've got plenty of time to review all the input as well as the rules. And then September, I can't remember the date, I shouldn't speculate, so mid-ish September is when the commission. So yeah,
And the
that's-
June meeting will be in Bend,
Yeah, and the June meeting will be in Bend.
and I can get you the September meeting date. Just a moment here. 12th and 13th of September.
Well, I believe that concludes agenda item C, advice to the Water Resources Commission. And that was the end of our agenda.
That's the end of the agenda,
for
yeah.
today.
So,
So, I hear a motion to close out today.
Second.
All right.
All right,
When was the September meeting dates?
12th and 13th. And I would expect it'll be here in Salem.
Okay, cause I got it down for some reason on the tenth.
that's our meeting. That's our groundwater advisory committee meeting.
Okay, we're still having that one?
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah, so
all right,
that'll be
all
the
right.
Tuesday before and then.
All right, I missed them.
The Thursday,
Okay.
Friday.
Okay, perfect.
Well, thanks, everybody. That was a good discussion. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Okay.
And our GWAC meeting for June is still the 11th?
I believe that is true.
Okay,
But I will send out a reminder.
yeah, perfect, okay.
All right, I'm going to close down the online. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate your time and sticking with us. And we will reconvene. Yeah.
It's good to see people in person.
Yeah, no kidding.
Thank you, Mike.
Bye, Lance. Bye, Trent. Oh, hey, Trent, since you're back, sorry, we didn't get you as a yay, nay, or abstain from accepting those bullet points.
That's a yay. Thanks. Let's step out for a minute.
Hey. All right, perfect. That's
Thank
what I
you.
thought, just making sure.
You bet.
Thank you, Trent. Have a good one. Bye-bye.
So, I am not gonna be present for the